To really get into U.S. history, huh?
Sounds like it.
And you sent over this YouTube video to start us off.
Uh-huh.
The History of the United States in 10 Minutes from Knowledge.
Yeah, it covers a lot of ground quickly.
It does. It blasts through thousands of years. So we're going to try to slow things down a bit.
Okay.
Zoom in.
Yeah.
See what insights we can uncover.
Absolutely.
It reminds me that the story starts way before 1776.
Oh, for sure. For sure. The video highlights how people got to the Americas over 30,000 years ago.
Wow.
Probably by the Beringia land bridge.
That's amazing.
Imagine a bridge connecting Siberia and Alaska.
Wow.
Potentially submerged by rising sea levels. And that creates a whole new chapter in human history.
Absolutely. Thousands of years of history before any Europeans even showed up.
Yeah.
The video mentions all these distinct cultures that were here. Adena, Iroquois, Coles Creek, Pueblo, Mississippian. Makes you wonder, were these different groups interacting?
I'm sure.
Trading? Were things peaceful? Or were there conflicts that we just don't know about?
That's a great question. It definitely wouldn't have been a static picture.
Right.
And here's something else to think about. Hawaii.
Well, go.
Settled way later by Polynesians.
Much later.
Yeah, between the 1st and 10th centuries AD. It reminds us that what becomes the United States is really emerging of very different timelines.
Right. Very different stories coming together.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so the stage is set, and then 1492 hits.
Right.
Columbus arrives.
Yeah.
And the video makes it sound like that's the starting point. But I'm guessing it's more like it just speeds up what was already a complicated situation.
Exactly. The video touches on this a little bit by mentioning all these different European powers.
Like who?
Spain, France, Portugal, England. They all had their eyes on the New World.
Yeah.
It wasn't some coordinated effort or anything. It was competition, pure and simple. Each country was trying to grab whatever land and resources they could.
So it's not just Columbus landing on an empty continent.
No, no, no.
It's the scramble for power.
Yeah.
Playing out on this enormous stage.
Exactly.
And then there's Jamestown in 1607, the first successful English colony.
Yes.
Did that become the models for how all the other colonies were set up and run?
Not really. Each of the 13 colonies had its own kind of government. They all had to answer to the British Crown, of course.
Of course.
But they also had their own locally elected legislatures, voting on taxes, making laws.
Oh, so they had a taste of self-governance even back then.
They did. And as you can imagine, that becomes pretty important later on.
Yeah. I can see how that sets the stage for no taxation without representation.
Absolutely.
But the video also points out that by the 1770s, 1/5 of the population was enslaved Africans.
Right.
All this rapid growth built on such a terrible system.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder how anybody back then thought that could last.
It's a good point. A stark reminder that the pursuit of opportunity for some often came at a very high cost for others.
Oh, absolutely. And that tension between growth and exploitation.
Yes.
That seems to be a recurring theme in U.S. history.
It does, doesn't it?
So we've got these bustling colonies figuring out self-rule.
Yeah.
But they're still under British control.
Right.
Then comes the French and Indian War. Now, most people probably remember the name.
I would hope so.
But what was its real significance in the grand scheme of things?
Well, think of it as the domino that knocks everything else over.
Okay.
Britain wins the war, but it costs them a fortune.
I see.
They need to fill up the treasury again.
Right.
And guess who they look to for new taxes?
The colonies.
The colonies. Exactly. Those increasingly self-sufficient colonies.
So that's where the whole no taxation without representation cry comes from.
That's it. Not just a catchy slogan.
Right.
It was a direct result of this war and the financial mess it left behind.
Makes sense. And this leads to the Boston Tea Party in 1773. I remember that from school.
Yeah.
But was it really that big of a deal back then?
It was. It was the symbolic act that turned discontent into defiance. It showed Britain that the colonists weren't just complaining. They were willing to take serious action to stand up for their principles.
So where do the Continental Congresses fit into all of this?
Well, at first they were focused on petitioning the king,
Okay.
trying to find some kind of peaceful solution.
Right.
But things escalated quickly.
And they basically become a wartime government.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the American Revolution itself.
1775 to 1783.
It's one thing to declare independence,
Sure.
but actually winning a war against the mighty British Empire?
Yeah.
Was there ever any doubt that the Americans could pull it off?
Oh, there was huge doubt.
Really?
The video mentions Saratoga in 1777. That victory secured the Northeast, and it convinced France to formally join the Americans.
Wow. So that was a turning point.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's one thing to have a bunch of idealistic rebels,
Right.
but it's another thing entirely to have a major European power backing you up.
For sure. For sure. And then, of course, there's George Washington.
Yes.
More than just a general, right?
Yeah. Much more. The video kind of glosses over this.
It does.
But what were the real leadership challenges he faced?
Yeah.
The things that made him so essential to the American victory. It wasn't just about tactics on the battlefield.
Right.
He had to somehow keep this ragtag, often unpaid army together.
Wow.
And at the same time, he had to deal with all the politics in Congress.
Yeah.
He was really the glue that was holding the whole revolution together.
Fascinating. And then in 1783, the Treaty of Paris is signed.
Yes.
Independence is won.
Finally.
But the video also says that the U.S. got all this land to the west.
A lot of land?
Was that part of the plan all along?
Not really. It was more like the British just wanted out.
So they said, fine, take it. We're out of here.
Basically, the brand new United States gets this huge territory.
Wow.
Which sets the stage for westward expansion. And remember, this is land we're talking about.
Right.
The ultimate source of wealth and power back then.
It's a recipe for growth, but also for conflict, as we'll see. We've got this new nation flush with land, eager to expand westward. But before we get swept up in all that go west, young man spirit, let's think about what all this meant for the people who are already here.
Right.
You included this academic paper in our sources.
Yes.
Settler colonialism and the elimination of the native.
It's tough read.
Heavy stuff. But it feels essential to understanding this part of the story.
I agree. The YouTube video mentioned those early Native American cultures.
It did.
But this paper really digs into the devastating impact of European arrival.
Right.
And it frames it as settler colonialism.
Okay.
Not just conquest, but this deliberate displacement and dispossession of the indigenous peoples.
So not just battles for territory,
No.
but a systematic effort to take this land permanently for European settlement.
Exactly. And the paper talks about disease as a weapon.
Smallpox, measles.
Yeah. Was this intentional biological warfare or just a tragic side effect of contact?
That's what I'm wondering.
It was more the latter.
Yeah.
The impact was just as devastating. The paper mentions mortality rates as high as 90% in some places.
Wow.
Imagine that entire community is wiped out by illnesses they had zero immunity to.
Just horrific.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just disease, right?
No. The paper also talks about forced relocation land grabs.
Like what?
Well, the Indian Removal Act of 1830 is a prime example.
I've heard of that.
The paper argues that this forced migration, the Trail of Tears, that it was all a deliberate policy to clear the land for white settlers. It wasn't just about pushing Native Americans westward.
Right.
It was about severing their connection to their ancestral lands.
Really breaking their cultures.
Yeah, and ultimately their ability to survive and thrive as a people.
That's a side of westward expansion that's often ignored in that whole manifest destiny narrative.
It is.
So we've got this grand sweeping overview from the YouTube video.
Right.
And now we have this stark critical analysis from the academic paper.
Two very different lenses.
Like two completely different views of the same events.
That's why it's so important to look at things from multiple perspectives.
I agree. Each source adds a new layer of depth and nuance.
Exactly. And our next set of sources brings us even closer to the lived experience.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a collection of primary documents.
Oh, I love primary sources.
Letters, diaries, speeches from people who were actually there living through these moments in history.
That's incredible. It's like hearing history whispered in your ear.
Exactly. Not just reading it from a textbook.
So what kind of stories do these documents tell?
Well, we have a soldier's letter from the Civil War.
Wow.
Vivid descriptions of battle, the camaraderie, the longing for home. It reminds us that behind these big historical events, there were real individuals facing incredible hardship,
Right.
showing amazing resilience.
It gives me chills just thinking about it. What else do we have?
We also have a diary entry from a woman traveling west
Oh, like-
on the Oregon Trail in the 1840s.
Wow.
It's not just about the miles they covered,
Right.
but the emotional toll it took. The constant uncertainty,
Yeah.
but also those moments of joy amidst all the difficulty.
It's amazing how these primary sources make history come alive.
They do in a way that no textbook ever can.
Absolutely. Okay, so we zoomed in from the big picture
Right.
to the individual stories of people who lived through these times. And then you included this historical novel,
Yes.
The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead.
Have you read it?
I haven't yet. I've heard it's powerful, though.
It is.
How does fiction fit into a deep dive on history, though?
Think of it as emotional truth,
Okay.
not necessarily literal fact.
Right.
Whitehead takes the idea of the Underground Railroad.
Mm-hmm. The network of safe houses that help slaves escape.
Exactly. And he reimagines it as a literal underground railway.
Really?
It's this brilliant blend of history and imagination, and it forces us to confront the horrors of slavery in a really visceral way.
So it's not a history book,
Not in the traditional sense.
but it can deepen our understanding of the period.
It can, by tapping into those emotional truths.
And I'm assuming it's based on solid research.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Whitehead's descriptions of the antebellum South, the characters, the whole atmosphere, it's all rooted in historical reality.
Yeah.
He doesn't shy away from the brutality,
Yeah.
but he also celebrates the resilience and humanity of those who resisted this awful system.
I'm definitely adding that to my reading list.
Okay.
Okay, so we've gone from the broad strokes of the YouTube video
Yeah.
to the granular detail of these primary documents, and even into the world of historical fiction.
That's right.
What connects all these different sources, though? What are the common threads?
One major theme that emerges is this tension between progress and injustice.
Okay.
We see all this westward expansion,
Right.
but at what cost?
Back to
We
the-
see technological innovation, but who benefits and who gets left behind? American history isn't this straight line towards something better.
Right.
It's messy, often contradictory, full of twists and turns.
Definitely. You know, as we've been going through all this stuff about U.S. history, I've realized something.
What's that?
We haven't really talked about the role of geography.
It's like this silent character in the story, isn't it?
Exactly. We talked about westward expansion,
Yeah.
the Trail of Tears, the differences between the colonies, but not geography as this force that really shaped events.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, think about it. The sheer size and variety of the land had to have played a huge role in how the U.S. developed.
I think so.
You've got vast plains, towering mountains,
Right.
fertile river valleys. Did all those geographic features influence where people settled, what they did for a living, even how they saw themselves?
I think all of the above.
Early on, the Appalachian Mountains were a huge obstacle for the colonists.
Oh, yeah, a big barrier to westward movement.
For decades.
Right?
Then you had the Mississippi River, this vital artery for trade, connecting the interior of the continent to the rest of the world. And then gold is discovered in California.
Right.
And boom, everyone's heading west again.
It's like geography was dictating the pace and direction of expansion.
It really is.
Yeah.
And we can't forget about climate either.
Of course.
The different climates of New England and the South.
Yes.
Those shaped their economies, their social structures.
They did. The South's warm climate allowed plantation economies to thrive,
Right.
reliant on slave labor, of course,
Sadly.
while the North developed a more diverse economy based on smaller farms industry and trade.
It's like geography was laying the groundwork for those divisions.
Yeah,
The ones that would eventually lead to the Civil War.
absolutely. And it's not just the physical landscape either.
What else is there?
We have to consider what's called human geography, the way people interacted with the land and changed it over time.
Okay.
Think about the development of cities, the railroads,
Right.
clearing forests for agriculture.
Uh-huh.
All those human actions reshaped the American landscape and in turn influenced the course of U.S. history.
So it's this two-way street.
Exactly.
Geography shapes human actions, and human actions reshape geography.
You got it. And understanding that interplay
Yeah.
is key to understanding the complexities of U.S. history.
Right. It's not just about what happened,
Exactly.
but where it happened and why.
Right.
This is giving me a whole new appreciation for geography. It's not just maps and capitals.
No.
It's about understanding the forces that shape our world.
It is. And speaking of forces, we can't forget about technology.
Oh, yeah. From the first tools used by Native Americans
Right.
to the digital revolution of the 21st century,
Huge changes.
technology has been a driving force in shaping the United States.
Absolutely. The cotton gin transformed the Southern economy.
Uh,
The railroad opened up the West.
Yep.
The internet connected the world in ways we couldn't have imagined just a few decades ago.
That's true.
Yeah,
But I'm guessing each of those technological leaps also had some downsides,
of course. There's always a trade-off.
like the cotton gin.
Yeah. While it made things more efficient, it also increased the demand for slave labor.
Right. And the railroad, while it helped with westward expansion, it also displaced Native American communities.
Exactly. A double-edged sword.
The internet, too,
Yeah.
connected people globally, but also brought new problems.
Like what?
Concerns about privacy and security, the spread of misinformation.
All true.
Yes.
So to really grasp how the U.S. has evolved,
Yeah.
we need to understand technology's impact.
It's not just about the inventions themselves,
Right.
but about how they've changed society and culture.
They have the very fabric of American life.
It's almost like history is giving us a roadmap,
Interesting.
not with specific directions,
Right.
but with a sense of the terrain,
Okay.
the patterns, the forces at play.
Yeah.
And maybe by understanding those forces,
Mm-hmm.
we can navigate the future a little bit better.
I like that history doesn't give us easy answers,
No.
but it gives us a framework to understand the present
Right.
and to make informed decisions about the future.
It reminds us that we're all part of this story,
We are.
this grand experiment that is the United States.
Exactly.
Well, this has been an incredible journey.
It has.
From the Beringia land bridge to the digital revolution.
Wow.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
What a fascinating and thought-provoking look at U.S. history.
It's been a pleasure.
And remember, this is just the beginning.
Oh, yeah.
There's so much more to explore,
There's so much.
so much more to learn.
Keep digging.
We encourage you to keep the conversation going.
Absolutely.
Delve deeper into the topics that interest you.
Yes.
And challenge yourself to see history from new perspectives.
I agree.
And who knows, maybe your own deep dives will uncover new insights,
It's possible.
challenge assumptions, and spark even more curiosity about this amazing story.
The ever-unfolding story of the United States.
It is. Until next time, keep exploring.